It's not a late meeting?
No, we
We try and keep it that way.
No.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank you for allowing me to come and talk. I'm not here to try to change anybody's mind or debate anything regarding our schools and facilities, but as part of our reflection on the election from May is we want to go back and take a look at, where are some things that we maybe didn't connect, where are some things that we didn't listen, maybe we didn't get information, and obviously this is one area that we want to try to connect with, and we probably missed in the first go around. We didn't do things perfectly by any means, but just wanted to have an opportunity to, number one, answer questions from all of you, and to kind of give you a background on why we ended up with the ballot measure we ended up with. If you go back in history, our school buildings in Coos Bay were mostly built with timber money. All of our education was funded, all of our buildings were built, all of our expenses were paid locally with local timber money, and today we get zero timber money for the Coos Bay School District. That's another conversation altogether, but somewhere along the line it transformed to the state taking over the funding of public education. They allowed us a certain amount of money per child in our school system. And that money is to run the programs inside our buildings. It is, some of it, we currently put aside about 10% to upgrade the buildings we have and to keep them functional for our kids and for our staff. But the majority, the bulk of that money goes towards the programs within those buildings. The state doesn't give us money to actually fund any new buildings or any big remodels that might take place. Consequently, a lot of our buildings are old and starting to really show their age. Marshfield High School was built in the first phase of Marshfield High School was built in the late 30s, and that was actually built with the War Powers Act and a lot of the federal money that was putting people back to work. So that building up there was put together and built at that time, 1939, 1940. And then there was an addition added on in the 50s to that high school to try to soak up the rising population back then of students we had. Back in the 50s, we had well over 2,000 students on the Marshfield campus. Right now, with the 8th graders there, we're right at 1,000 students. So we're half of what we were in the 50s population-wise. The only buildings that we've built, the old high school used to be called the East Branch, back when I went to high school there. It was the original high school on the Marshfield site, sat out on the point where there's a parking lot there now, obviously, but that building was built back in the early 1900s. It replaced Central School, which was down kind of near the Episcopal Church, where that property is now. That's where the actual first high school was for Coos Bay. And then the East Branch was built. That building was torn down in 1999, and then a bond was passed in the Coos Bay area for about $10 million. It built the new Pirate Hall, which is our science and math building right now on the Marshfield campus. Was built in 2000. That's our newest building. Harding School was built in 1923. Blossom Gulch, built in the early 60s. Millicoma School, built in the early 60s. Sunset, another one of our fairly new buildings due to a fire and insurance paying to rebuild that building where it sits. But it's going on, it's going on close to 30, 40 years old. Most of our other buildings, 50 to 90, 94 in age. A lot of the infrastructure, the HVAC systems, those systems are out of date, and they don't make parts for those anymore. We had a situation with our auditorium this last fall where the heating unit broke down. There were no parts to be had. We did manage to get it down to one of the local manufacturing shops downtown and see if they could build us that part. And they were able to do that. It took about 3 months for that process to unfold. In the meantime, we had some pretty cold events in the auditorium, but we got through it. It was fine. But that's just evidence of some of the infrastructure that is out of date and hard to replace. When you talk about taking 10% of your general fund budget to try to keep up with those things. Our maintenance department does a fantastic job of getting the buildings we have shining and looking good when school starts. It's a more and more difficult task as the years go on for them to be able to do that. And more expensive task. And so we tried, when the first bond was paid off for Pirate Hall, we made an attempt to pass another bond to take care of some of our buildings in 2008. And I'm sure you all know what happened in 2008, economy-wise. I don't think anything was going to pass in 2008. Everybody was in duck and cover mode, just trying to survive.
Go there a little bit more.
Since that time, we've brought in some engineers, we brought in some architects to look at all of our buildings and do a needs assessment just on the infrastructure and the buildings themselves. The bill to go in and bring all of our buildings, current buildings, up to code, bring the electricity up to code, bring the heating ventilation systems up to code, and our roofs. That estimated bill came in at about $84 million. We all kind of cringed at that when we saw that. And some of the buildings, when we went through them, like the Harding building and Blossom Gulch Elementary, Blossom was built on pilings, wooden pilings, which are no longer there. They've since rotted away, so it's kind of floating on the marsh. And it's functioning right now, but if you've been in the building and you try to walk through some of those halls, there's some definite sinking going on. Our maintenance department has had to come in and concrete some steps and fill back in where the steps to the outside have separated from the ground below, and just as a safety precaution and insurance.
The code's interesting. When you talk about buildings, I don't in school, so I'm not familiar, but when you hit the pilings, I'm very familiar because I'm from the San Francisco area. And when you talk about $3 to $4 million, was that before this coming to 9.5?
How come they haven't maintained it?
Because once they tear it from out, what kind of?
Yeah, correct. And that's kind of where I was going. That's okay. No, that's a great question. But that's kind of where I was going, was that there are a couple of buildings, Blossom and Harding in particular, that as the engineers take a look at those, once you swing a hammer in one of those buildings, you're gonna pay more to try to bring that building up to code than you are to build brand new. And so we formed a committee of community members to take a look at that needs assessment and to try to decide, what are some of those priorities. I think first and foremost, because of that tsunami inundation zone and the fact of Blossom being in the condition it is, that's priority one for us is to get kids. We have 600 kids in that building, and we'd like to get them out of there and into a different structure. So, as we look at that, being able to get them moved into a structure, our 7th and 8th grade kids are separated right now. They're not together in a traditional middle school, junior high type setting. We'd like to get them back into that educational setting. So we started to look at take the needs assessment, take a look at the buildings that are recommended not to try to remodel, and look at what it would cost to replace the Harding building with a junior high school for 7th and 8th grade. Build a new elementary school to replace Blossom, get kids out of there. And at the same time, we do that on the east side of town. Over on the west side of town, Madison Elementary is in need of some upgrades. It's fairly structurally sound itself, but the electrical, the heating, there are about 6 relocatable classrooms, temporary classrooms that were kind of added on to that building over the years. Those buildings, temporary is a good word for those buildings. They're basically modular buildings and not really built to last long term. So the idea would be to go in, remodel that building, bring it up to code, and then add some space and get rid of those modular classrooms. And then there's some work to be done on Millicoma School as far as heating, ventilation, roof, ADA compliance. And once you start attacking those remodels, you have to bring everything up to current codes for ADA, electrical, and everything else. And so the group, when we first looked at, what would it take to do everything that we thought, going off of that needs assessment, we could accomplish. And if you were to tear down Madison, build a brand new one, tear down East Side and build a brand new one, and do the work we needed to do, that came in at about 95, about 98 million, and we knew that was too much. We knew that was not even close. We weren't even going to try to throw something like that out there. So we started peeling away at some of the things on the list. One of the things on the list was Marshfield High School and bringing that up to date. That building, as described by the engineers, is kind of a beautiful old ship that needs to be put into dry dock and have the electrical, the heating, some of the little nooks and crannies that are there that for safety purposes could be straightened out, so you get some better sight lines in that building. That was on that list, and we carved that away. Structurally, it's in good shape. We can continue to keep that building going, and the thought process by carving that out and getting us down a little closer to a number that we were comfortable with, and I say comfortable. I'm not even in my wildest dreams going to imagine that 65 million is a comfortable number for anybody. We realize it's a big ask. We realized going in that it was going to be a big ask for our community. We did feel that as we started to go back and look, If we were able to get some new construction for that elementary, get those kids out of Blossom, get Madison up to speed, get some of the fixes done on Sunset and Melcoma, then our maintenance bill that we're setting aside can be used to start to tackle some of the things at Marshville High School, like the heating and ventilation systems. We do have a plan in our budget right now. We for this year we set aside money to start tackling that project at Marshville High School. We applied for a couple of seismic grants that we received from the state of Oregon to bring the auditorium at Marshfield and the main gym, two buildings that get a lot of community use, and we put a lot of people in those buildings, a lot of kids in those two structures. So we received those grants, and we're in the process of the engineering work right now, and we'll go out to bid on those projects, and those projects will be completed by spring of 2019, and we'll have those two structures seismically upgraded to current codes.
Where did your numbers come from? Did you have contractors in there?
We had architects and engineers come in and break down the cost of what it would be, pretty much square footage wise. So the fine details of the rebuild is part of the design, which we would get into if we got to that point, but mostly square footage.
Because I know these projects tend to take on a life of their own.
They can.
You know, Brian, you answered your own question when you started out. We're in recession, and we haven't got out of recession since 2008. Warehouse is gone.
Sure.
International paper's gone. All these big timber companies that funded these schools, they're all gone. How are you going to pay for this thing? Even if we went along with it, how are you going to pay for it? And that's the thing that nobody comes up with. And I think what irritates any group is the way it's laid out, 65-point-some-odd million dollars, and there's really, there's no scope there of what exactly where the money's going to go onto each facility. I mean, it's like a shotgun figure. I've been in the construction business all my life.
Actually,
You know, and this is the problem you're going to have selling this thing. They'll, you know, either, of course, the next time around, you'll come down with your numbers a little bit and hope this thing flies by, but you're probably liable to get more people voting next time around, and it'll probably go down later next time around. But, you know, you got to sell this thing, and all these little broke logging communities are going to charter schools, or they're trying to get away from unionized labor. You know, these unions, teachers' unions, they don't vote Republican, they don't vote for timber issues, they vote against us. So how in the hell are you going to sell this thing? And you're a nice guy, both you guys are.
Sure.
You know? You come in, you got a lot of guts, come in here,
Sure, man.
all this, you know, and we appreciate that. But it's
Here,
a hard
here.
sell, man.
It is, and I don't argue that at all. I know it's hard, so, you know, and
Are you done as far as questions? Because I wanted to hear
Yeah,
you out. Okay.
I'm pretty much done. I just wanted to just kind of get a little history of school buildings and how they were built and how they were funded, and now when communities build new buildings and new school buildings, it's done with tax bonds. It's done with property tax bonds.
You know, I'll say one thing about the board and everything. You guys at least brought it before the people and had a vote on it.
Sure.
North Bend didn't do that. They're on the water board for their money right now.
I would like to say something there, Mike. They voted in front of the people, and the people voted.
Yeah.
And you didn't recognize that the vote came out in the people's favor. You wanted it in your favor. That's why you want to run it again. I read some of your flyers you sent out, and you're basing your bond on a population growth, which I read in one of your flyers, on 2.5% per year. Now, since 2010, till now, there have been an increase in Coos County of 5%. But if we look at the school district, in 2011,
there was 3,400 students. Now, in 2016, it's 300 less. So when we look at who was actually coming in through this area, it was not people with children. It was retirees from California without children.
Sure.
And those who left town, that was, if we say, the parents and one child, so that would be about 900 people leaving Coos County or the school district alone. So I'm surprised that you used the 2.5%, because the 2.5% would set what you claim to be $185 dollars per $100,000 home. In reality, since you're not reaching those numbers, it might even triple.
I think
And the bond, you have set the bond to $66 million, and you know very well that that figure is not going to hold. It'll be a whole lot more. So I'm not happy with what I'm seeing. I'm also, now I have managed the company here in this town, now I'm retired, and I did it for 27 years. And buildings need maintenance, and equipment need maintenance. And a good manager, he takes care of that as he goes. I didn't sit there for 27 years looking at everything, and then the day I was going to retire, I said to the owner, you know what, I want to fix everything. No, I took care of it over the years, so I could do it to a reasonable price. And I feel, as a citizen and a taxpayer, and with my years in shipping, which have been a total of 50 years, that I have always been kept accountable for what I have done. In the private sector, you have to produce, you have to show a profit, and you have to pay your taxes to the public sector, in this case, to the school district, which I have done for all those many years. And then suddenly we get a bond like this. I have nothing against kids, but you know, I also like grandmothers, and I think it's wrong for you guys to take grandmother in the wheelchair and push her over the cliff. That's what you do.
Well, Kim, I'd like to
My
respond.
mother's
to
one of those grandmothers in a wheelchair.
So a couple things. So the 2.5% increase isn't really based on the population of Coos Bay. It's based on the tax base. So the people that actuaries that figure out how bonds are going to get paid for, they looked at the history of the tax base in Coos County and said, we're confident that the tax base is going to increase 2.5%, the assessed value. And you know how tricky that is with real market value is higher or lower than assessed value. There's still quite a gap between what real market value is and what the assessed value is on a lot of property. So every year, many properties are just going to go up 3%.
They're gonna go up, but it's not because they're worth more, it's because of the formulas, the hoodoo that they used to do that.
Well, but that's based on limits that were voted in the past to keep property taxes at a reasonable level that we thought was best for the people at that time. So I feel like
Wages haven't gone up, you know, the base wages for a lot of people, just they've been stagnant for years. You know, granted, there's a group that hasn't been, but a lot of them are professional government workers, and that keeps going up, but the rest of them, of course, you don't. So where's this money gonna come from? That's really the selling point you guys have gotta do if you're gonna sell this thing, and of course do a better job breaking it down, whether how the money's gonna be spent. You know, and then it brings back the old thing, and you guys went through that, you grew up here, so these damn towns, they should have got together years ago, and the school system should have got together. There's a lot better, more economical way to run the cities here in these little sawmill towns, and they still are, than what we've been doing. And I was on North Banner, I was on a consolidation group, a couple of them, and changed the name of our business from North Bend Fabrication and Machine to Coos Bay Fabrication and Machine. You don't wanna talk about, these people wanting to hang me, but that was back in '83 when we could still do some, or '82.
Yeah.
You know, and we still had, it looked like it might work, but now, it's pretty ugly out there. And you're trying to sell something that's, looks to be gold plated to the average person, you know, and I know it probably isn't, but, you know, you're dealing with, Davis Bacon laws, little Davis Bacon laws. Impossible, this day and age, when you've got carpenters around here that are working for less than $14 an hour, most of them, unless they're on a government job of some sort. You know, it's just not realistic. So that's what you gotta sell.
How many folks in here are on fixed incomes?
Good point.
That's,
Yeah.
Question for you?
Yeah.
This
So
is
can you
getting
tell us-
interesting at my age. But basically, when you throw out a number, this is mine, because I came from a bigger area. You threw out a number, I have no idea, I know it was engineers, but just the mechanics of that, okay? Somebody has to understand the cost. Who does your plan check? Who looked at the designs? Because you've got a whole count, there's plenty of good engineers here that would probably come help you for nothing. I would, I'm an electrical engineer. And for example, just as an example, when you said HVAC in some of these older buildings, they're gonna use the old ductwork again. They may run into asbestos issues or all kinds of, which, is that in your bids?
That's in there.
Okay.
Asbestos abatement.
Yeah, and so that abatement looks good, but I really think I went to a couple professional engineer meetings here when they were doing the railroad bridge. Really impressed with the amount of people you have here in this county. And if, it's like someone watching those guys that are doing the bids, because did anybody bring up any alternative HVAC, like split systems or something like that?
No.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm quoting. You need, if someone like myself comes in, I'm not wasting any money, I'm looking at what would be, I think, the best for you. And when you hit the electrical, technology has changed. And I know, for example, Emerson donates tremendous amount of equipment to people, school districts and stuff. So there's a lot of people out there that would like to see their product in your schools.
Sure.
Thank you.
I have a few questions if we have time. And although my perspective is construction, I'm a plumbing contractor, and don't get me started on prevailing wage and Davis Bacon, because it makes zero sense to anybody in the industry, and it just seems like a blue card. My questions do not have to do with that, because most of you, of what you've been talking about, has been the nuts and bolts of building and construction, and those are evident. You know, if you're gonna have schools, you have to have buildings that work, and if you're gonna build a building, you put it out to a competitive bidding process. That's the American way, and it works, notwithstanding prevailing wage. But there are larger issues, elephants in the room, that when we talk to people about education budgets, these things come up, and they transcend issues concerning just like, look, we have to build a new building. That's, people can understand that, but I've written some down here, and I'm unfairly burying you. Grab a pen and start taking notes, but here are some of the questions that we get.
Sure.
Okay, what is the all funds budget per student? And then how does that all funds budget per student compare to other states, and how does our quality, educational quality ranking compare to other states? Is there a complete disconnect, or is there any relationship? What are we getting for the money compared to ostensibly our competitors in the other states? And what percentage of, because there's the whole thing concerning PERS, which is an elephant in the room. And some people have said, it looks like child trafficking. It's like, well, we need to raise more money for PERS. It's for the children, you know, because we have to get an education for them. And it just looks like, a Godzilla. And so what percentage, it goes to that looming disaster? And also, what percentage, this is a question that comes up, what percentage of the budget goes to non-classroom staff, and compared to what that percentage was 60 years ago? Nothing has changed. Kids haven't changed. Teachers haven't changed. All that's changed is national, big government meddling is the only thing that's changed. So how does that percentage change? That's really, really important. And because we're looking if I can do math in my head here, like, we must be well over $250,000 per average classroom. I don't really know you, that this is your bailiwick, but you know, where is all that money going? It's not going to the teacher. Anyway, so these are questions that I'm
The
kind of.
basement goes to the teachers.
What's that?
A big chunk of it goes to the
Well, it
staff.
should, right. But, so I'm just kind of unloading you with a bunch of questions.
Sure.
Not just saying, like God speaking to Job, you know, answer me this, answer me that, you know what I'm talking about. But I'm just saying, these are the kinds of questions that we get, and you know, we need to build new buildings. If we're gonna have schools, we have to have buildings that work. Everyone can understand that, although we can grump about things. And you know, as the buildings sink into the marsh and become unsafe, something has to be done if we're going to have schools. But these other issues are elephants in the room in people's minds. They're philosophical, they're emotional, they're rational questions people have. Why do we have so many non-teaching people compared to when I was a kid? And it's like, and what is the rationale for that? So these are questions that we have to respond to people.
Yeah. When you say non-teaching, right?
Administration.
Administrator?
Yeah, we'll let the janitors go, you know, but,
How about all the
but,
teachers' aides?
yeah,
Let the
we'll just,
teachers' aides are students involved.
you know, like I knew everybody that was in the schools when I went to school, and it was like, these are the teachers, and then there's this guy and the vice, this guy and the janitor, and that was the whole enchilada. And now we've got these entire other buildings filled with people that are like highly paid with this pyramid of all this bureaucracy, and they never even show up in the classroom. And what are they doing? And how did that whole thing get created? You know, I mean, we can blame the unions, maybe that's fair, I don't know, but it looms in people's minds. And maybe it's not said, but when a budget thing like this comes up, it's like, wait a minute, where is this going to end? Because my kids are, what's this, all these people in these cities, these offices, and in this building, and there's no kids in there being taught. And these people are being paid a buku lot of bucks to do what? And so those percentages, compared to 60 years ago, loom in people's minds. Education hasn't changed. Or shouldn't have.
Also, if you guys are asking, what can you do to sell it? And unfortunately, the main guy that brought this forward to us before the election is not here because he was very informed. But I believe that people want to hear that you guys have every intention to use whatever money you get to the best, as best you can. They want to hear that, including things like, and then we're going to sell this building since we're not going to be using it anymore, and then we'll be able to recoup that, you know, and so that people actually get the feeling, because people have a feeling that there's a lot of government waste. You guys just had an article recently where there was a pizza oven bought.
In
for
That's not good.
North Bend, yeah, but I'm just saying, you know, that these are the kind of things people hear, and so then they just have a shrug, oh, they're just wasting our money. So when you're communicating it, if you can give them a feel and actually do that, you know, where you feel that you are, okay, it's just another government ploy for more money. That you feel like, okay, they really need it, and they're going to do the best they can. I think that you might get a better outcome.
Whether fairly or unfairly, the union, PERS, big government cabal is looking increasingly like the sheriff of Nottingham. And then so that's how people do it. You know, it's like, oh, here they come again, hi. You know, and whether fairly or unfairly, that's a perception and I don't know what you can do about it without getting tossed into jail. But anyway, these are questions that come up.
Well,
Now you're
you're
pursuing a bond, and automatically you feel like, well, we need to go to the property owners and they need to take care of it. Now, state of Oregon, they kept the Elliott State Forest. Have you gone to the governor, for instance, and said, now you have that forest, and it's down in our neighborhood? We need to do something about our schools. Our population growth down here is retirees. We cannot keep on asking retired people and taxpayers in a community where there is no work. Because basically there's not. Look at Coos Bay. The department stores are gone. Everybody shop at Walmart. That's why we all look alike the way we dress. So you have a couple of tattoo parlors, a couple of pot shops, and a couple of casinos, and that's it. All the good stuff in this area has gone to the wayside. And I have been here since '88, and I have seen it happening. Also, I will recognize what he said about schools. When I went to school in Denmark, there was about 1,200 people, and it went through high school in that particular school. There was one superintendent, one vice superintendent. Both of them was also educators.
Yeah.
And then they had a secretary. And that was about it. There was nobody else. There was no counselors. There was no school buses. Here I see a ton of school buses all over the place. I had 3 miles to school, and we went to school during the winter also.
You can blame the school buses probably on Coos Bay, because we cut busing in the late 80s. And the state came in and said, made a law that said you have to bus kids.
Plus,
Michelle Obama, she wanted to make sure that the children was eating the right stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, if there's no school buses, there won't be any fat kids around.
I've been thinking about this since we first started talking about it, and I've got a list of some of the things that you're up against, and whether it's fair or not to you guys, I don't know, but I do know what's out there. And it starts with the teachers union in Salem screaming and yelling, you have to tax business to pay for our retirements. And it moves on to the trust factor that was kind of hinted at in several conversations here of school is tied in with government, and you've got the trust factor. It's people don't trust the government with their money anymore. And then you're fighting against the legislator in Salem right now, who's doing everything they can to change our personal income tax, who, for lack of one vote, missed out on taxing our businesses before profits, taxing businesses net, did tax one of the most expensive things we have, healthcare, and a lot of it's being done in the name of public unions, of which most of your employees are public unions.
So can you address that issue of how many students and how much per student the state gives?
Also,
State gives us approximately $7,200 per student.
And an average
That's well
class-
below the state
More than
average.
that.
State average is 13,400.
Yes.
We don't
Okay,
get
so
13,400 per student.
7,200 and an average classroom size is 25?
25, yeah. 25.
There is a disparity between the cost of living in Portland and the cost of living here, and different districts do get different amounts of
So if
money.
you do that math for me, 25 students at 7,200 apiece, that sounds like a lot of money. I mean, couldn't you rent this building for that and put 25 kids in it?
That's $180,000.
$180,000 for 9
Yeah.
months. So, I mean, if you rented this room for, was that ever considered?
Renting.
Rent a piece of property. Is there any reason the school has to build?
Please, instead of bought,
Yeah.
The newest
Where-
school in the
where-
district isn't
This
even
small
isn't being
ball,
used by the district. Bunker Hill School is leased out to a private school. It's the newest one in the district. Why don't they not lease it out, move Milner Crest up there, or Lawson Gulch, or whatever the one's sinking in the mud, put them in Bunker Hill.
Bunker Hills is a charter school.
Yeah, that's a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they put a
It's,
lot of money into it and then took the kids out.
Yeah,
Well, and that was my, somewhere in between where I left off and where I was going was brick and mortar schools. What's the future of brick and mortar schools? In my circle, I have almost no, none of my friends that have their kids in public schools anymore. And I don't know what that number is, but I just know that in conservative circles, there's a lot of people that don't want their kids, that aren't happy with the product you're putting out, which is another huge thing that you're up against is we see these kids out marching and screaming and yelling now, and we think, wow, what did the schools teaching these kids?
And the
It's
teachers
not
are
about
encouraging
brick and
it, so
mortar,
it's not like it's our
about values and
imagination.
morality.
Well, and that's two different things, I know,
and
but
spiritual agenda.
it's a long list. Go ahead, sir.
okay, yeah, I want to preface my comments. I don't think there's anybody here that's going to deny the necessity for either upgrading or building new buildings. That's a given. The problem is the way you're going about it. And I don't envy you, your position. You're between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
So I'm going to state a few realities here that a lot of people, I spend all day, every day on the street talking to business people. Now, one of your people that analyzed the outcome of the election said something to the effect that, well, the businesses are in favor of this because the downtown area voted for it. The business people don't live downtown. Duh. So whoever came up with that's a bonehead. Number two, we the taxpayers entrust you to manage our assets because we're the ones that own it. So we're trusting you to manage that property. Where has all the money gone for capital maintenance and upgrades over the years that led us into this situation? I know the answer, it's a rhetorical question, is going to the unions.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, we are the ones that are giving you money by the buckets full for the children, and you're turning out a second-rate product to begin with. The singular biggest complaint I get from my customers, you can't hire anybody that wants to work or that knows anything. Recent graduates, two of my sources at SWAC tell me that any graduate from Marshfield that enrolls in SWAC is automatically enrolled in remedial reading, remedial math. So what kind of a product are you turning out?
I would disagree with you on that piece.
Well, you can disagree all you want.
I've got
These
two
are
kids
realities.
at home.
The other reality is who's paying for this.
Yeah.
I personally know 3 people that had that bond passed, they would have been forced out of their homes. They're retirees, they're living on the edge, and apparently the system doesn't give a rat's behind about people. It's only about growing the system. You're turning out kids that aren't educated, they're indoctrinated. I know because I talk to my friends' kids. They're learning as seniors in high school the stuff I learned in 5th grade 50 years ago, 60 years ago. I don't want to go.
And they can't spell.
But you're turning out an inferior product. I'll give you an analogy. Let's say you own a company that builds widgets, right? And your widgets aren't selling because they're substandard. So you go for more financing and you say, hey, I need $66 million so I can produce more widgets that nobody's going to buy. Rather than looking for the problem, well, why aren't your widgets selling? Why are your widgets substandard? And why don't you bring these widgets up to standard before you start producing more and more? And that's where we're at with this bond measure. And I think it's tremendously tone deaf to want to put this back on the ballot after the voters have actually spoken. And I'll tell you what, you put that on the ballot again, it isn't going to pass. It's probably going to go down in defeat by a bigger margin because it's the talk of the town. I talk to an average of probably 50 or 60 people per day. And nobody likes this except the education community because they're the ones that benefit. So turn out a decent product. start showing us where all of our money has gone over the past, 30, 40, 50 years to maintain and improve our capital investments, because that's our investment. And somebody hasn't done their job. And then you want more money to do another crappy job? I don't think so.
So we need to be
And
respectful.
people moving to this area, when people want to settle in a new town
Did I miss anything?
and buy a house, they're looking at the price of the house, they're looking at what kind of property taxes there are, and they're also going to look at that if you settle in Coos Bay, you're going to pay on that school bond maybe $600, $800, maybe $1,000 more than if you move half a mile north into North Bend. So, and now it was based on that 2.5%, and I know you talked about that, because, and you talked about tax base, and people coming in, it would actually, over 26 years, first year 2.5% would be about 375, and I haven't run the numbers for the 26 years. But it's pretty close to that you would double the population in this area. And how come that you think that the growth in this area will continue when everything is gone? Young people don't want to stay here.
Because the schools are so bad, that's the problem.
Yeah.
We need to make Coos Bay great again. And in order to do that, we have to invest in it.
Well, you know, Coos Bay.
That's what we gotta do. We gotta
Coos Bay
look
is
within ourselves and say,
basically gone.
we gotta look within ourselves and say, you know, we've gotta
The
do
fishing
this.
is gone.
It's not gone there.
All that
I've
is
got
gone.
lots of clients.
You have a casino,
They're doing great.
that's about it, and it's not going to change. And our politicians in Salem, they don't give a damn about the coast in this area.
Yeah.
They want it to be that there is a hotel down there where we can go and spend the weekend, and that's about it.
I see
Over
that,
the
and
years, this area has approached Salem to get one thing after another done, and nothing is getting done. And don't you give me that Trump thing that let's make Coos Bay great again. That's a bunch of crap.
Joe Ray Perkins.
See, there's also a,
She's next.
I have a question. So how much is the timber revenue down in the county that's affecting the school district?
We get no timber revenue for the school district.
How much did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, how much did the school district used to get?
I'd have to go back and look. I don't think we got much 5 years ago either.
So
That all was changed in the 90s by
A
Clinton.
lot of it goes to the county.
With the
It was going to fund roads
Okay,
and safety.
but wasn't the ONC, wasn't that money supposed to go to the school districts? That was the whole point of the ONC lands, was that money for the Oregon and California railroads, that money was supposed to go to the schools. And so now the timber, the forests are shut down because of the environmentalists, right? And so that money that was supposed to be coming specifically to the school districts, not to the roads, not to City Hall, but to the schools. So it went from some figure up here down to nothing. What about fishing?
They
Revenue.
pay income taxes, they pay property taxes, just like everybody.
Fishing is,
Except for they just, yeah, there's a shortage of salmon.
Trying to sell.
You're trying to sell a building bond, and
When there's not
you're
enough.
tied to the whole rest of the education process.
Yeah.
Because nobody in our age group separates the two.
Yeah.
And that's the hard sell. Rob?
Yeah, I'm probably one of the few people besides Avery here. I don't know how many people have kids in Coos Bay, Coos County. 9 kids. My son just graduated, and I'll tell you what, I talked to several kids who, one young man, he was complaining because he couldn't get a job, and I said, well, you just graduated 2 years ago. He said, yeah, I can't read. So, you know, this is the kind of thing that people are hearing on the street, and then we hear we want more money. And then we look at things like the latest study that came out of the NEA, which says that Oregon teachers are making $2,000 more on a national average than every other state, but yet, you come down in graduation rates, you're in the bottom 5, and in vocational training, you're down in the bottom 5, and getting the attendance, you're down in the bottom 5. And that's something that's just an overall view of Oregon schools. But what I'd like to see, that when you put this bond out, is I'd like to see some figures of how much your average teachers are working. How many kids are graduating out of the total kids that go into kindergarten are getting out of high school? And when those kids are getting out of high school, do they have any training? And then a couple of other things you were talking about, making this bill work. Innovation. And I've heard a couple of people tip on this, but you're talking about buildings right now that were built in the 1930s. And even though students haven't changed, education has changed because the world has changed. We have modernized. We've come a long way. I mean, right now, we're coming to a point where you're asking us to build buildings that may last another 70 years, but kids may not be going to school in 70 years. They've got helmets, virtual reality helmets, and I can see virtual classrooms coming right down the line when you don't even have to send your kid to school. So we've got a chance to be innovative, and I don't hear anything about innovation. I hear more about the same brick and mortar failure, and once again, this is not emotion. These are statistics from the National Education Association. So you deal with the reality of the statistics, and maybe if that truth was put out there instead of Make America Great, which, hey, we're all Trump supporters, right? So we don't like that idea. Make Coos County and Coos Bay great again. But how do you do that when we need plumbers, we need carpenters, and you know what? I had to pay for my son all of his material in his wood shop class, and yet we've got teachers who are making a fortune over there. And they get off on summer times. They don't have to work as long as a lot of other people. And I hear this exaggeration from teachers all the time that, oh, our work is so much harder. I was a supervisor at the largest optical lab in New Mexico. And I had to work by ANSI and OSHA standards. And with people that came in off the street that I had to train each and every one to do it precisely by those standards. And so what we're seeing here is that we're not getting what we're paying for. And it's hard to want to give when you're asking for something that we don't see any change or any innovation. And I'd like to hear more of that, and I'd like to see more of the statistics when you go around selling it.
The emperor has no clothes. Honest, open-minded innovation in education will of necessity disenfranchise the unions. That's what the direction it goes.
Well, don't forget it's the teachers' unions that oppose all of this innovation because they've got a monopoly. Here's another aspect of this. If this thing passes, it's gonna have a cascading effect throughout the economy. You're gonna raise taxes on a lot of people that can't afford to pay. My question is, how are you going to rationalize it to somebody that loses their home because they can't afford to pay the additional taxes? How are you going to rationalize it to people that rent property when the property owner had to raise their rents because of the additional taxes? This is going to affect virtually everybody in the area. Whether you have children in school or not, it's going to cost everybody more money. Now, I'm not saying we don't need to do this, but there's got to be a way to do it so you're not putting people out of their homes, so you're not penalizing renters, because that's what you're doing in essence. You know, anything that happens in the economy ends up being a pass-through to the ultimate end user. Businesses don't pay taxes. Consumers pay taxes. And
the world called me and said the Republican Party is the only group of people that stood up against this, and we want to know why. And I thought to myself, we didn't make a stink about this. We passed a resolution. We did notify the paper. They didn't even put it in the paper. People around this county, and there was a majority of them, albeit 30-something votes, but a majority of them are passionate about this, and they're not necessarily even Republicans. So you're going to have to address that aspect of it too, because
Well, you know, another aspect too, this young lady mentioned the O&C lambs. We used to get significant money from timber revenues to
Yeah.
support education. The teachers, almost probably 99% are Democrats. They're living out of our pockets. They're the same twits that lobbied the enviro wackos to bring the lawsuits to stop the timber harvest that goes to schools, and then they want more money.
and you heard earlier,
Does this make sense to anybody?
this party is the party that's trying to bring timber jobs back. And with it, money back into the economy.
Hell, I'm not even a
Not just timber
Republican.
jobs, but all kinds of jobs.
In fact, one of the things you could do is tell the community that you're gonna go to Salem and you're gonna lobby for those O&C lands. I mean, if you guys could come out and say, look, we can actually use this stuff to fund our schools again if you actually started cutting down some trees. But once again, you have to make the stand yourselves, because they don't care what the people think. But maybe when their own administrations, their own part of the system starts speaking out and saying, look, we're hemorrhaging here. We've got old buildings and they're just deteriorating before our eyes. And yet you guys are just closing off the forest. And you know, you were talking about the fishermen. They just closed off fishing for, yeah. So don't say that it doesn't hurt. It does hurt. They are closing it off.
That's lost wages right there. That's
Right.
lost wages, that's lost income tax revenue, which goes to the state, which helps fund other things. So you end up with the snowball effect that is going on. And so, although I think everybody in this room would agree that our children being educated properly is important because they are the future.
Yes.
But it goes back to if the retirees cannot live in their home, when you're looking at it in Coos County, I don't have by the city, you're looking at 2015 number, 17.8% living in poverty.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
The proof is you're feeding most of the kids.
Yeah, and the households with children, roughly 33 or 35% of the households with children under the age of 18 are living in poverty. And then you say, well, it's only 2% because, see, the way that our property taxes go is they can only increase, and they increase automatically by 3% a year. That's an automatic increase. But then you also have the other bonds, which I'm not familiar with that, or what, your whole tax structure is. But then you have compression because of all the other bonds that are piled up, so then it stretches out that debt longer, and now you've got more debt, and you've put yourselves into a horrible catch-22, and Rob is right. You've got an industry that has been pro-Democrat and supposed to be pro for the little people for years and years and years, and they don't want the timber cut, but yet they don't have a problem with that timber burning up and putting way more pollutants out in the air and killing Bambi. And I'm going to venture that there's a good percentage of the men and probably women in this room that enjoy hunting and fishing. You want to talk about stewards of the land. That's your stewards of the land right there. But yet everybody's bought into that mantra of environmentalism when yet the people that recreate in that outdoors, they're your biggest environmentalists that there is because they care about the land. They don't want to kill off all the Bambis because if all the deer are gone, they can't go hunting. If all the fish are fished out of the ocean, they can't go fishing. And so this idea that Republicans want to deplete all the resources is...
Well, plus the children being taught that the loggers are their enemies and the polar bears are their friends. How is that going to end?
Well, we've gotten a long ways away from our building bond here, so.
I have some questions I'd like to ask.
No, it's all part and parcel of the same
I
problem.
understand.
Well, in regards to the bond,
We got one question ahead of you here.
So I just got a couple questions. So I grew up here, even though I graduated from North Bend, I started off in Charleston and Madison. And I'm coming back after 30 years. And, I noticed that population's the same, but obviously it's a lot older. And I noticed there's a lot of empty schools. Do you guys still own the empty schools? What's going on with those buildings?
Some of them are sold.
Charleston School was sold.
Fairview sold.
So you're
Foundation
using,
School, Green Acres,
River has-
so you're using everything that you have, asset-wise.
Can I just say one thing?